welcome back to Me in the Flesh. I haven't got to play this in a little bit. I'm excited to play more, but also I've been recording for a couple hours already today, and my throat is motherfucking shot. So this is gonna suck. That's all I have. It's gonna suck. I did rest my voice for 30 minutes before starting though, so... Was it 30 minutes? I tried. I aimed for 30 minutes. The crowd outside the store has thinned out a little bit, but it's still sizable. At least those people from earlier who had been gossiping have either gotten into the store or have wandered off, tired of waiting. I gingerly squeeze my way past the waiting line and back onto the streets, inhaling deeply. Already the sweet scent of honey is much thinner, cut through the musty smell natural to the air. Overhead, the skies are starting to streak through the darker shades of green as the sun dips towards the horizon. Though there's the strong urge to linger, to wait and see if the store will quiet down at all, and even turn back inside to help Nyarg, I know I shouldn't. So I don't look back as I dig my heels into the ground and take off at a quick sprint down the street. At least, these last few deliveries won't take too long. Thanks, Phil. Seems like you had a busy day, huh? You're cutting it pretty close. Yeah, things have been a little hectic today. I can imagine since tomorrow's the big day and all. Good work. You should go rest up. Thanks, I will. Have a good night. You too. Even smiling feels exhausting after the long day, but I still make sure to wave as I trot off, pawing at my pack to make sure all my deliveries have been taken care of. All done, and with barely a minute to spare, I really did cut things pretty close. But at the same time, I don't regret it. Feels like what happened today was pivotal, and absolutely worth a bit of extra running. I ended up taking the long route back home, backtracking a little bit. I walked past Nyarg's store, which has gone quiet by this time. I can still see the flicker of movements inside, but it looks like it's mostly just Nyarg cleaning up the store by himself. And, sorry, started at the top again. I cut through the park. The atmosphere here is different after dark. The spindly trees casting twisting shadows across the uneven ground. The air feels colder, too, and it feels different without Brenton's boisterous presence walking with me. I walk past the Overlook office, which continues to watch silently over the city, the spire's eyeballs lazily cast over the landscape, though they blink slowly now and again, as if growing tired. I think of Yeastel and his Overlook pod, devoting his life to guarding the city. Tomorrow's bound to be a big obstacle for him, and my chest aches with the desire to help him in some way. I give the spire a small wave, even if he's bound to be too occupied to see such a small gesture. It's the thought that counts. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that the spire's largest eye gives a slow blink in response, but it still uses my mind a little as I turn away. My thoughts feel fuzzy as I walk home, watching the three suns sink out of view, one at a time. When I get back to my place, I just grab a salt packet and collapse on my bed. I usually don't eat in bed, but I'm too tired to care today. I roll over onto my back to unwrap the fabric and drowsily bite off a small mouthful of salt. The familiar sting spreads through my mouth, hot and sharp. I try not to think about it as I let it dissolve on my tongue. Even eating feels exhausting. I turn my head to glance towards my window. Past the closed curtains, I can see a sliver of the night sky, two moons lazily traversing that dark expanse. Though I bring the salt to my mouth for a second bite, I find that I just can't be bothered. I'll eat in the morning. I do the bare minimum to wrap the salt back up so it won't scatter over my bed during the night, but that's the absolute limit of my energy for the night. Even knowing I have to get up to clean up before falling asleep, my limbs feel so leaden and I find myself drifting off. But even as sleep begins to overtake me, I find myself thinking over the events of the day. A small shiver of nervous anticipation races down my spine all the way to my toes, prompting me to wrap my blanket closer around my body. So much for a quiet eclipse. Tomorrow will probably be a very important day. Ooh, I hope so. I jerk awake to the sound of my alarm beetle buzzing. I immediately close my eyes and roll back over, burying my face in my pillow. The desire to go back to sleep is tremendous, which is pretty unusual. I almost never have trouble waking up in the morning, but my limbs still hurt a little bit after all the sprinting yesterday. My thoughts immediately snap to the strange talk I had with Yeastel, and that certainly wakes me up. I jolt upright in an instant, my drowsiness dissipating like so much smoke. I sit up in bed, scuffing a hand over my face and picking off the pus that's dried over my eye during the night. A cursory check of the time tells me I'm not late, but I should move quickly if I want to be on time. So I do, and I try very hard not to think about the eclipse. I'll have the time to spare for that once I'm actually on my route. Huh? I told you to take the day off. Oh. I'd made it on time to work, squeezing past some loitering crowds in the streets, jogging the last stretch of the way to the salt plant, only to find the place quieter than usual. Though there was still the familiar rustle of salt pouring into filters, the scrape of long poles mixing through vats, and the glop of honey being emptied by the bucket. There were fewer workers than usual. The boss seemed a little less harried than usual, too, and when he beckoned me over, he sprang that surprise on me. Delivery roster today's short. He has the delivery list in hand, and he flips through the pages, swiftly double-checking each one with a stubby pencil. Turns out a lot of people asked to have their delivery for today put on hold, heading out of town because of the eclipse, I imagine, or have plans of some sort. Whatever the reason, we barely have half the usual number of deliveries. He scratches at the scales on his snout with the back end of his pencil. Felt silly making all of you run your routes, so I reorganized the routes, and a few of you have barely taken any days off, so I'm giving you today to rest. Go enjoy the eclipse. I automatically give a dip of my head in thanks, but it still hasn't properly sunk in. I build my daily schedule around my work, and suddenly being told I have the whole day to myself is jarring. The boss seems to notice my hesitation and gives me a hard clap on the back. Even if he meant it playfully, he's a strong guy, and that casual whap is almost enough to bowl me over. He laughs as I wheeze. Go on, Git. You're young. Go do something fun. You deserve it. What sweet guy. You sure there isn't anything I should be doing? You doubting me? No, sir. Leaving the salt plant empty-handed so early in the day feels profoundly weird, and I'm not quite sure what to do with my hands as I head towards the door. It's almost a relief when the boss calls me right before I reach the door. Right, Bill, hold on a sec. Yes, boss? He tromps over, digging through the pocket of his apron and pulling out a few scraps of paper. He returns most of them to his pocket, but holds one out for me. Somebody from the Overlook office came by earlier and gave you this. Said it's for you. You still sent somebody? The boss nods. The piece of paper is neatly folded into a square, and unfolding it reveals a short note written in Yeastel's impeccable handwriting. Of course he has impeccable handwriting. Bill, I was hoping I could see you today if you aren't too busy. I'll be at the Overlook offices all day, so please visit me if you're able. Please don't worry about it if you have other plans. Thanks. It's written so politely, which is very much like him. I smile to myself as I fold the note back up and tuck it into my pocket. Something wrong? No, nothing's wrong. He still just wants to see me about something. Hey, boss. Yeah? What are you going to be doing during the eclipse? He smiles, the mask straining to stay in place on his snout. I can almost picture all the teeth he's showing. The boss doesn't smile often, but when he does, it's very kind. So it's a pity the mask is in the way. Aww. Sorry. I got a, rice cracker as a snack, and I got a little piece of it stuck in my front teeth. Which reminded me of something really weird, so side tangent really quickly. I used to have 3 tongue piercings. Some of you might know this. I got one, and then a couple of years later I decided to get 2 additional ones. And I really liked them. I liked the way it looked. But it made eating and like using my tongue in general such a chore. And, for example, I couldn't run my tongue along my top teeth. It just, the piercing would get stuck, the piercings would get stuck on my teeth. So I'd only have like the little tip of my tongue to try and run along my mouth. It was awful. Anyway, I just thought of that. I don't know if that's an interesting story or not, but you're welcome. I'll be watching the eclipse with my partners while we enjoy a packet of mercury salt together. Mercury salt? That's right. He gives a proud huff, arms crossed over his chest. Jin thought it was extravagant, but I know Dirth loves it, so I went for it. If I let this special day go by without doing something nice for the loves of my life. That sounds really nice. I hope you have a nice evening. Aww. I love it. We love seeing a wholesome poly couple. Aww. I'm happy for you guys. We will. So should you too. I wish the boss a good day and leave soon after. I don't want to delay him any further when there's still work to do. Hopefully he and everyone else at the plant will be able to finish up quickly and enjoy the rest of their days. Though I do still feel some guilt about taking off myself when everyone else is working hard. I also don't want to waste the time that was kindly given to me. Standing out in the streets, I watch people go by for a few minutes. It's actually not as crowded as I feared it would be. No doubt a lot of people are traveling, or are already holed up with people important to them. Far down the street, I can see what looks like a small brawl. I guess that might also be something important to people involved, but I do hope it doesn't last too long. It would be awful to spend the Eclipse day in a salt bath. Tugging my cloak closer around myself, I inhale deeply. The air feels electric, stinging my nose. Alright, I guess I should get moving. The streets are abuzz with activity as I head towards the Overlook office. If there was a strange electricity in the air yesterday, then the very atmosphere is crackling with energy today. As I walk past a popular garment store on the main street, the window shatters as a body comes hurtling through. Wow! Fragments of organic glass go skittering in all directions as the defenestrated individual rolls across the pavement. Shouting and howling, a second figure comes bowling out of the store moments afterwards, landing on the first in a vicious tackle. There's only a short pause before fists start flying as both parties attempt to pummel each other. Jeez. A small crowd gathers around the fighters. Some people spectate quietly, while others cheer and shout, and I just realized that my webcam is in a different space than it's normally been, and I'm very sorry about that, but I don't care. It's where it's at now. I don't... Spectate, cheer, and shout. Okay. It doesn't matter if these fighters are strangers or not. They are no doubt engaging in something that matters a great deal to them. On this auspicious day, fights too are important after all. This may be a way for them to settle a long-standing grudge. I peer past the onlookers for a few minutes before continuing my way, giving the crowd a wide berth just in case. It wouldn't do to get embroiled in a big brawl after all. I've just put the fight behind me when a pair of Overlook officers run past me, shouting for the crowd to back off and give the fighters room. My steps slow as I glance over my shoulder. The fight is still going on, judging by the shouts and scuffling noises, and the officers wave their batons to get the attention of onlookers, urging them to step aside. Of course, it's the Overlook's job to ensure that things go smoothly on Eclipse Day. It wouldn't do for strangers to interrupt a personal fight, or for the fight to involve third parties. It must be difficult. There's so much going on today. Up ahead, a loud shout catches my attention. A small crowd is gathered around a tall figure who stands with arms raised, shouting indistinctly. I think they're announcing something important. The crowd gathered around them seems excited. This, too, is probably something the Overlook officers will have to keep an eye on. I can see the Overlook spire up ahead, looming above the other buildings. The spire's eyes start back and forth rapidly. Even from this distance, I can see the spire's flesh pulsing rapidly in spots, frantically pumping blood through its veins. I don't think I've ever seen it so active. He still must be working harder than he ever has. The note he left for me had seemed so candid, but East always seems to try and seem at ease. It's a lot of seem in one sentence. I can't imagine this is actually easy, even for him. The fight behind me sounds like it's escalating. The heavy, meaty sounds of knuckles pummeling into flesh echo down the street. I don't pay them any attention. Instead, I quicken my pace, heading towards the Overlook office at a run. I don't want to keep Yeastel waiting any more than absolutely necessary. Excuse me. My first thought is the office feels weirdly quiet as I push the door open, which is odd. Shouldn't it be bustling with activity today? And then I realize what's going on. The office is emptier than usual. Some desks look like they've been abandoned in a hurry, paperwork thrown in all directions. Others are manned by their usual occupants, piled high with papers and communication bladders, their tubes crisscrossing the floor like cobwebs. There's the constant, furious scratch of pen tips on paper, punctuated only when a worker grabs a bladder to whisper furiously into it. The communication tubes pulse non-stop, carrying a steady stream of messages out of the office to the Overlook officers out on the field, I assume. Doing my best not to interrupt their concentration, I make my way past their desks toward the Overlook pod in the corner. So immersed in their jobs, the workers all ignore me as I step over their communication tubes. Yeastel? The eyes on the pod are half-lidded, and it's not until I speak up that they blink open and turn to me. I got your note, but I can come back later if you're busy. There's a brief pause before the eyes simultaneously shut. Then the pod cracks open with a wet, squelching noise. No, I'm glad you came. Yeastel's voice is muffled by the sound of fluids sloughing off of him. His exoskeleton sheds the coat of slime easily, and when he brushes his hand over his body, it comes off in viscous strands, plopping back into the pod's pool in big globs. Thank you for dropping by on such short notice, Vil. It was a rather sudden request, so I wasn't sure if you'd be able to make the time. He bends down to brush the last of the pod slime off his body, then carefully extracts one leg from the pod, letting the slime drip off completely before he sets it on the floor. Then he repeats the process with the other foot. Just checking the time. Then his balance slips. Oh no! Do we get to catch him? Perhaps because of a residual streak of slime, his foot skids sideways and he topples over. Fortunately, my reflexes are quick enough that I can prop him up before he hits the floor or crashes back into the pod. Whoa, are you alright? He still seems stunned for a moment, eyes wide in shock. His gaze slides over to me, studying my face before he gives a small nod. Yes. Thank you. I suppose that could have been dangerous if I hit the floor. Behind me I hear a worker ask if everything is okay, but most of the others don't even seem to notice anything happening. Their focus is incredible. Perhaps that's what it takes to keep things running smoothly during the eclipse. I carefully help Yeastel back onto his feet, finally realizing just how exhausted he seems. Without the coating of slime, it's more obvious that his exoskeleton is lacking its usual luster. His eyes half-lidded as he gingerly rubs a hand against the soft, connective tissue near his jaw. Aw, that's rough. I'm chatty, so why can't there be more people and, take turns? Shifts! Why does Yeastel have to do it all? I'm afraid I'd rather lost track of time. I haven't been able to rest in a while. I might be more exhausted than I thought. You need to rest. I keep my voice firm as I look at him, meeting his gaze steadily. Of course, but my work. Yeastel is clearly distracted, eyes closed as he struggles with his thoughts. But he clearly needs to rest. I need to persuade him somehow. Tell him he can't work as well if he's in poor condition. Say he needs to take better care of himself for the future. I'm going to quick save. You know what? I'm going to actually save. So this is my thoughts on it. Tell him he can't work as well if he's in poor condition. That's really nice, and it's very good at convincing people. I've definitely heard that before. Like, hey, take a break so you can work better. But I'm worried that he'll see it as you need to work hard, and you can't do that if you don't rest. Instead of I'm concerned about you. The second one sounds more like I'm concerned about him. Say he needs to take better care of himself for the future. That sounds so heartfelt, but I'm worried it won't convince him. But I think I'm going to say the second option, because I'm a squishy little squish, and I like feelings. Oops, sorry, I burped. Tasted like rice cracker. Chocolate rice cracker, that's what I had. I love them. They're so good. He can't just think in the short term. Even if this eclipse is important, he needs to think of the future. Yeastel, I know your work is important, but this won't be your only eclipse, right? You're our overlook. We'll be looking over the city for a long time, so you can't run yourself ragged like this. So please rest for a moment. There's also something you wanted to talk to me about, right? Yeastel's attention snaps over to me, as if I'd said something terribly important. He blinks hard before giving a small nod. Right, of course. He inhales and exhales slowly. I watch the soft portion of his exoskeleton swell with that breath, settling back down as he empties his lungs. After 2 or 3 more slow breaths, he seems much calmer and offers me a smile, his usual smile. You're right. I think a short break would be good. Even though he still looks exhausted, it's good to see him at least acting like he usually does. I can't help giving a small sigh of relief. Yeah, that sounds great. We end up back on the rooftop, beside the dormant spire. It, too, seems a little strained. The eyes seem somewhat bloodshot, as they lazily scan the horizon. When I gingerly touch one of the protruding lumps of flesh, it feels a little hot. The skin throbs slightly beneath my touch, and I can feel a steady pulse of fluids beneath the stretch of skin. I'm afraid I've overworked it somewhat. Yeastel approaches slowly, his hands running across a large vein snaked over the handrail. It's not in any danger of serious damage, of course. I'm sure I would give out long before the tower ever does. But I'm afraid I don't yet have the experience and intuition that the previous overlookers did. They could often pinpoint sources of danger and commotion and look toward them more quickly. Lacking that intuition, I have to search the city more frantically in search of any trouble, and it strains the eyes. I apologize. His voice is gentle as he directs the last statement at the tower. The tower is silent, of course. Not that it could ever speak, but without an overlook present in the pod, it doesn't even glance Eastel's way. It simply quietly gazes over the city, automatically searching for any significant signs of activity. Activity that it's sure to find plenty of. Now that we're on the rooftop, I'm much more cognizant of how unusually active the city is. Here and there, colorful plumes of smoke crawl up from between buildings. It's lit from beneath by the flickering light of fires. Celebratory fires, perhaps, or malicious ones, possibly. To our east, I can make out a large crowd gathering at an intersection. It boils with activity, though from this distance, it's hard to make out what the individuals are doing. From all around us, the sound of shouting and cheering and screaming carries on the wind. The breeze always whips away those voices before we can make out specific words, but the impression we get is always the same. Today is a day unlike of any other in recent memory. Controlling that chaos must be a gargantuan task. I can't imagine how difficult it is for Yeastel and the other Overlook workers. Right. Yeastel? Yes? I'd been lost in my thoughts as I stared out over the city, and Yeastel had taken the chance to quietly take a seat beside me. My tailbone hurts. Seat beside me. His legs swing off into the empty air of the edge of the building as he looks up at me. I take a seat as I continue. The office seems much emptier than usual. Did something happen? I assumed it would be much busier on the Eclipse. Oh, that. I'm afraid we lost quite a few workers today. Officers, too. They're individuals, after all, with their own priorities and desires. It may be our duty to watch over the city, but it's difficult to place duty above something truly important to you. Say, traveling someplace to meet someone very important, or settling a lifelong grudge against a very bitter foe. Eastel's voice is steady and soft. There's no trace of ill will or bitterness in his voice. In fact, part of me wishes they were here to help, of course. But another part of me is grateful. I mean, they trust me enough to look over the city despite their absence. I should have prepared for this in the first place. It was my mistake not anticipating it. So I'm grateful they trust in me regardless. He seems pensive. I badly want to comfort him to make him feel better, but it's difficult knowing what to say. They were right to trust you, weren't they? I'll just have to do my best. Things are going smoothly so far. After all, I passed some commotion on the way here, but the officers got there really quickly, and it didn't look like it was getting out of control. You're doing a great job keeping the city safe. I suppose I'm holding on so far, but that isn't enough. He still seems absorbed in his thoughts. Unwilling to interrupt him, I wait quietly until he goes on. I've managed to avoid any catastrophe so far, but only barely. I've had to claw my way through some tight situations already, and I'm sure things will have escalated while I'm taking this break. I'll have to scramble to catch up once I'm back in the pod. But you were also right that I need to rest periodically to maintain my focus, or else I'm liable to make more mistakes, which would be equally bad. I don't have the experience or composure or intuition that the previous overlookers did, and though they assured me I would soon catch up to them, I'm afraid that won't be the case. Even if this eclipse goes safely, it may be sheer luck. Perhaps this year's eclipse has been on the tame side so far. So if the future eclipses are rowdier, if there's more going on, I'd surely fail to keep the city safe. There's a deficiency I need to fix. The outburst is a little shocking. In all the time I've known Yeastel, he's always been unfailingly calm and kind and gentle, thoughtful and composed. Someone who always kept tight control over himself and was sharply aware of everything going on around him. There had always been an ease to him that I'm now realizing I'd been taking for granted. It hurts to think that he's been harboring these distressed thoughts, and I hadn't been able to help him. Yeastel. We never know what will happen in the future. None of us. So I don't think it's fair for you to be so hard on yourself. And I don't think you're deficient in any way. Like the previous overlooker said, if you're just lacking in experience, then that'll fix itself as time goes by, won't it? You're not lacking in anything. That certainly caught his attention. Yeastel looks over at me sharply, eyes wide, and my voice dies in my throat. Had I said something wrong? Oh, I'm sorry, Vil. I didn't mean to surprise you. I must have looked taken aback because Yeastel suddenly smiles. It's a little rueful, a little embarrassed, highlighted by the way he touches a hand to his face, fingers tapping against his jaw. I was so absorbed in my thoughts, I was practically talking to myself. There's something I should have explained first. That's why I asked you to come here after all. I apologize, I shouldn't have hurried to say those things. He seems to calm down somewhat, taking another deep breath before he shifts positions to look at me more directly. Bill, have you ever met one of my kind before? The conversation's not going exactly where I expected it to. Regardless, I give the question some serious thought, then shake my head. I don't think so. Not in my memory. Right, then I assume you aren't familiar with our life cycles either. Probably not. Then please let me explain. It won't go terribly long. Myself and many of the others who have served as Overlook, our kind has always been perceptive. We have always excelled in pinpointing anomalies in our surroundings and addressing them as quickly as possible. Of course, we don't take this for granted. In the long history of this tower, there have been many who have served without being the same kind as us, and not all of our kind are fit to serve as Overlook, either. It's a position we work towards and serve with gratitude. Those of us who are selected as the Overlook have always been honored by the position and pour all of our efforts into doing the best job we possibly can. Because we love the city, of course, but also because we don't want to have regrets. We don't want to look back at our time as Overlook and think, I could have done better. I could have done things differently. And in that vein, there's something all the previous Overlookers did before experiencing their first eclipse. Bonding with a partner. I understand now why he still reacted the way he did to my attempts at comforting him. This thing he was lacking wasn't an abstract criticism of his own abilities, but something concrete he felt he failed to do. Bonding with a partner. I feel slightly embarrassed, knowing I'd misunderstood him so drastically, but only nod to show that I'm following along with this explanation. I'm getting so into the story. He still continues. You see, no matter how perceptive we are still just one individual with one mind. By bonding with a partner, however, we evolve a step further. We create a deeper connection with a second mind and become something greater than a sum of its parts. And you feel like you should have made that bond before the eclipse? There's a pause before Yustel shakes his head. That isn't quite it. I don't regret having put off my bonding until now. Of course, it might have made it easier on myself to survive this eclipse if I were bonded. At least it would give me peace of mind knowing that I'd become the best possible iteration of myself before facing this challenge. But I also didn't want to bond before this eclipse because the bonding process would necessitate changing my relationship with that individual. A rather drastic change, and one that can't be reversed. The puzzle pieces are falling into place. I can see now why Yusel was discussing these hypotheticals the other day. That is what he had been worried about. My worry eases just a fraction. With a better understanding of what Yusel was trying to say, I think I can better understand his concerns. A drastic change to a relationship. Thoughtlessly, I murmur the words under my breath. Yusel nods and continues. Yes, one that can't be undone. Because we need to devour the person we're bonded. What? What? I see. That makes sense. What? This is unexpected. Okay. Now that I think about it, I've read about individuals like that in the past. They're somewhat rare. Individuals who can meld into another body to become a part of them. Or individuals who can absorb others to become a combined entity. Individuals who aren't complete without assimilating another into their body in some form. It must be a hard way of living, needing to depend on another in order to grow. I nod sympathetically. Alright, I'm starting to get what you mean. I guess those hypothetical questions weren't really hypothetical after all. I give a small grin as I say it, and Yusel responds with a laugh. It's the most relaxed I've heard him sound today, and it eases some of the tension that's been building in my chest. I suppose not. I'm a little embarrassed now, thinking of how transparent that was, but I badly needed to get it off my chest, and it was the only way I could think to bring it up with you. Yusel looks away once more, gazing out over the city. Someone below us shouts, but we can't see them from where we're sitting, and the words are indistinct, just one more sound adding to the ambience of the city. Vil, you're intelligent. I'm sure you can guess what I'm getting at. Of course. The air feels electric, like it's filled with sparks that burst around me as I give a small nod. I can't say I'm happy exactly, but I do feel like this is a tremendously important moment. I'm glad. He smiles without looking over at me, his gaze still directed out over the rooftops as he closes his eyes. His hand, however, creeps closer to me, fingers extended as if searching for something. I promptly extend my hand, allowing his fingers to touch against mine. His bones are flawlessly smooth and cool to the touch as they graze over the back of my hand. Then he squeezes my hand just once. His grip is gentle but tight. But even so, it wouldn't do for me to skirt around the issue. I need to talk to you about this in a straightforward and honest manner, or else it wouldn't be fair. It's just that I've never done it before, so I hope you understand if I'm somewhat nervous. He still exhales slowly before looking at me once more. His eyes are fixed on me intently, the amber of his sclera amplified and almost glowing in the warm sunlight. Bill, you're a highly attentive and diligent person. I've admired those traits of yours and aspired to be like you in some ways. There's a warmth to you that not everyone has, and it's the same warmth I'd like to show to the city. I respect you deeply. I cherish you. And in many ways it pains me to put you in this situation. The bonding process would bring us closer than ever. Our minds would be brought together as one. We'd be able to share our thoughts, our feelings, our dreams with each other with absolute clarity as an evolved being. We'd always be at peace with each other. But there are things we would lose. The ability to touch and see each other like this, for one. And because our lives would become one, there are things you would lose. We would make every effort to maintain connections to your old life, of course. I deeply respect the life that you have right now, and would never want to take any of it away from you, not a single bit of it. We would talk to the same people, visit the same places, experience the same things again. But it would never be the same. A bonding process is a big decision, and I don't ask this lightly of you. I won't ask you for your answer immediately. I would only ask, Bill, would you please consider bonding with me tonight, during the eclipse? Hearing the facts laid out like this is dizzying, especially when they're coming from someone as usually composed and calm as Yeastel. But because it's him, I can tell this is something tremendously important to him. His straightforward honesty means a great deal to me, and I give a firm nod. Of course, I'll give it some serious thought. Yeastel exhales hoarsely, as if he's been holding in a breath. Thank you. I knew you wouldn't be the type to immediately reject it or run away, but still, I was quite nervous for a moment. Thank you for listening to me, and for taking my request seriously. I appreciate it more than you can imagine. He withdraws the hand that had been touching mine and brings it to his face, brushing his fingers against the corner of his eyes. Already he looks like a tremendous weight has been lifted from his shoulders, and I feel the same, of course, seeing him look so relieved, and hearing the important questions from him without the veil of hypotheticals feels really refreshing in a way. We hear a raucous bout of cheering from somewhere far away, the shouts petering off into just a few stray whoops, and Yeastel gives a dry laugh. I suppose that's a good signal as any that I need to return to my work. He raises to his feet without waiting for an answer, then promptly offers me a hand. I accept it gladly, clambering upright and dusting myself off. I take it you aren't running your usual route today? I noticed you don't have your pack. Yeah, the boss gave me the day off. He said I should enjoy the eclipse. And he's absolutely right. I just noticed that his chin splits when he smiles. We're heading down the stairwell back into the office, and he still smiles as he holds the door open for me. It's a special day after all. I know how hard you usually work. You more than deserve a break today. You probably deserve that break just as much, if not more. Unfortunately, not today. Maybe next time, if there's a slow day. Yeastel already seems in much better spirits. The break seems to have done him a lot of good, and he stretches his limbs as he approaches the pod. The pool of fluids inside gleams, the unbroken surface practically shimmering in the light. But today I have plenty of work to get done. And with that, he steps into the pod. The fluids well up around his feet, pulling up higher as he begins to lower his body, and I blurt out in a hurry, Yeastel? Yes? Good luck with your work. You can do it. I know you can. You're going to do an excellent job keeping the city safe, and I'll be back in the evening right before the actual eclipse. Let's talk then. A heartbeat passes before Yeastel nods. He smiles, though it's seemingly his usual gentle smile. I can sense a flicker of something more in the way he looks at me. A sort of intimacy that wasn't there before, like we're sharing a secret. I guess we are, in a sense. I'm looking forward to it. Have fun out there, Bill, and stay safe. The pod closes up around him in an instant, two halves of its flesh shell coming together with the wet sound of suction. The numerous eyes on the pod roll once, as if trying to find their focus, open wide, and immediately go half-lidded. Yeastel must have promptly directed all of his focus outside. I'm sure it's necessary. The city must be escalating its activities as we grow ever closer to the time of the eclipse. Everyone else is also deeply immersed in their work, and I walk past them as quietly as I can, careful not to step on any of the communication bladders. Nobody so much as glances at me as I step towards the door, the creak of it pulling Open sounds so loud to me, but to them it doesn't exist. I'm glad such diligent people are keeping our city safe. Okay, well that's 35 minutes. So I think what I'm going to do is end the episode here and then immediately record the next episode. It was outside of my plans, but I think I can manage it. Just in case that was the end, I want to make sure. Well, no, I'm not going to record it immediately. This video isn't going up for another week or two, so I have time. I could rest my voice. Okay, sorry. Took me a moment to figure out what I needed to do. But I got there. And thank you for being patient. Also, thank you for coming out and playing with me. I had a ton of fun, and I hope you did too, and I hope you're excited for the end and to find out what's going to happen. And I'm very worried about Yeastel eating me. That is terrifying. I'm kind of a loner. The idea of spending the rest of my life tied together with somebody else seems horrible. But I'm happy for Vil. Alright, I'll see you all in the next one, okay? Bye!